interest from anyone? Seeing none, we'll proceed. We do have a delegation, and I know I've seen him. He's down at the back, James. And is David here as well? Yes, I see his hand. Come on up. You're going to provide an update from Bruce Power.
Great. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, James.
Thanks very much for having us this morning. David Abbott is with me. David is our new Director of Community Indigenous Relations, who came on board with Bruce Power a number of months ago, and we hired him. He's the former Chief Operating Officer for the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. So welcome, David. He's somebody that you're going to see more and more often if you haven't already. Thanks very much for having us on today's agenda. We endeavor, in addition to the ongoing communications we have through a number of forums, we always find it's helpful, at least on an annual basis, to come to Grey County Council and talk about what's underway at Bruce Power, some of our key initiatives, and of course provide members of County Council the opportunity to ask us any questions, things that may be on your mind, or feedback that you have for us. So have a bit of a presentation today. I'm not going to stick too closely to the script because I'll assume everybody has had a chance to review the slides, so I won't do death by PowerPoint. You probably get enough of that in your meetings throughout the week. But there's really kind of 3 or 4 sort of key areas that I think are helpful in terms of an update. Before I get into some of the core business items, really want to talk a little bit about our community investment program, and one component of that program that we announced earlier this year that's really about the key issue we continue to hear about, whether it's our employees, pensioners at Bruce Power, but more importantly, people broadly in the community. And consistently, the message we hear is the top concern or top priority for families in the region continues to be access to local health care. And so what we decided to do was take a multi-year view of our community giving program and really put a focus on healthcare in the 2019 to 2023 period. Obviously, and I know you find this with your own municipalities and levels of government, there's obviously a lot more need than there is capacity. But what we sought to do was provide local hospitals throughout the Grey, Bruce, and Huron region as best we could to cover the region as a whole. With a 5-year commitment of $1.5 million. There's a couple of hospitals that are not on this list that may jump out at you. I can tell you there's some discussions going on beyond this list around some activities that we do that more fully cover the region, including the municipality of Kincardine, which is absent from the list. But that's in Bruce County, so you're not fussed about the municipality of Kincardine. I know there's one from Grey County we're also working on that with the foundation on. But obviously a tremendous commitment here, and really what we hope this will do is give the foundation some planning room so they know what kind of funding they can expect from Bruce Power over a 5-year period. We're now just coming up on 3 years into our life extension project. When we say life extension project, what do we mean? It's a $13 billion project to, in a targeted way, invest in our assets to extend their life as far out as 2064. That project is, we often talk about the reactor retube as that's starting. That component starts in January, but we've spent about $2 billion on this project, so we're well into the project. And the project is on time and on budget, and the next phase of that project starts in January. Earlier this year, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce carried out an independent study that looked at the economic impact of that project. We're very familiar what that economic impact here is in Grey, Bruce, and Huron counties, but what's a real important message for us across the province is the economic impact it has in communities all throughout Ontario. Whether that's the manufacturing of components in Cambridge, Oakville, Port Hope, to fuel services, building trades, and I know we mailed out a copy of the report for any of you that like a copy of it that don't have it handy. I'd be happy to share one with you. But really what it does, it just shows the massive economic impact that this has on the province of Ontario. And that's really important at a time where the government has a priority on, as they would explain it, open for business, economic growth, jobs and employment. And obviously this is a major driver of that. Of course, we can't do any of the things that I talked about unless our units are running. We only get revenue, 99% of our revenue comes from one source and one source only, and that is generating electricity. We only get paid if we generate power. So we don't want to have to do major component replacements. We just want to generate electricity. All the other things we do enable us to generate power. We don't get any subsidies. We don't get any government grants. We sell our power at a price defined in a contract. If we don't produce, that's our risk. If we don't deliver the things we need to deliver to generate power, that's our risk. And that should be the case for a private sector company. But what's really important is we have had some really good milestones in the first half of the year in the area of operational performance. And the reason why that's important is we are out in the market with our owners and also with bondholders on Bay Street to get, as part of our financing program, to get the funding we need to carry out this project. The first thing people are going to look at is, what is your operational performance? If you have good operational performance, what does that mean? Well, that means firstly that you're operating safely. The safest nuclear plants operate the best. Why is that the case? Well, a nuclear plant operates safely if there's two things that are happening in the plant effectively. Your people are safely working and doing the right things when they should be the way they're supposed to, and the equipment is performing to a high standard. If you have those various elements, you perform well. And for example, in Unit 1, this is a unit that has been refurbed. It set a post-refurbishment record run on February 24 for 193 consecutive days. So that means that unit ran 193 days straight with no unplanned maintenance required on that unit. And that's important because that unit has been refurbished. It showed we did the right investments. And I'll just tell you from an Ontario perspective why this is so important. Over the last week, we have had some of our hottest days in Ontario. It has been hot, and it's supposed to be really hot again today. And we have had a peak in demand in the province of well over 20,000 megawatts. When we have those hot days in the summer, the people of Ontario are relying on our units to run. Over 60 to 65% of the power that was being generated on those hot days came from our nuclear fleet. Came from Bruce Power's units here, Pickering and Darlington. Wind power was a whopping less than 5% of our supply during that period, right? I'm not criticizing wind, well, maybe I am. That's okay, especially in Grey County. But my point being is nuclear is the workhorse of Ontario. Nuclear can be the workhorse and is the workhorse because we are running safely. Our people are doing the right things and we're investing in the equipment and investing in the plant. And so, sometimes people think, hey, when you're talking about these units running, is there a safety compromise with that? No, the safest nuclear plants are always the most reliable, and Ontarians count on us to do that. One of the things we are really proud of, we had Energy Minister Greg Rickford to site in January. I don't know if any of you have any. I would ask you a question, but it's that's out of order, and Selwyn will set me straight on that. But the IESO, Independent Electricity System Operator, they have over 35,000 power contracts in the province of Ontario. 35,000 contracts. Bruce Power is one of those contracts. Now, we're the biggest. We're the only contract the IESO has that if we find efficiencies, if we drive efficiencies in our business, we actually return money back to the province of Ontario through that contract. And in January, we announced that through innovation, simplification, more output, more reliability, we returned $200 million in savings in January. So the challenge I always like to put out to the electricity sector is we are thrilled to be one of 35,000 contracts that return $200 million. I would invite any other of the 35,000 contracts to return some money when they find some efficiencies to reduce electricity bills in Ontario. They're all welcome to do that. They doesn't need to be in their contract, but we're happy to take the lead. And I say that a little bit with tongue in cheek because, sometimes when you're talking about investing billions of dollars in an asset, people believe that's a high price of power because they just can't imagine. How can you spend billions of dollars on a nuclear plant and have a low price of power? But for those of you that have been to our site, you see we're generating a lot of power reliably over a long period of time. So it helps us drive that price low. So us winning on the price message is very important. It's great we have these economic impacts, but we don't want to think people are paying for those economic benefits through high electricity costs. We're actually a low-cost provider in Ontario. I want to spend a minute on a medical isotope leadership, and then maybe I'll wrap the presentation up there and take any questions people have without going through the rest of the slides. But This is an area we are incredibly proud of, and we as Canadians need to take a step back and recognize that Canada for decades has been a world leader in the supply of medical isotopes. And so when we think about cancer treatments today, when we think about, right over at the Owen Sound Hospital here, when we think about somebody that goes into either a neonatal intensive care unit, goes into a procedure, you know, if we think about modern medicine is anchored in medical isotopes. In the first instance, when you go into an operating room and you get poked with a needle, or you're on an IV, or you're intubated, or you have to get a Band-Aid, a suture, anything like that, the expectation we have in modern medicine today is that you're not going to get an infection from that. It's more likely you're not going to get an infection than you are. If you go back 30 years ago, the biggest risk of medical procedures was actually getting an infection. It wasn't the procedure itself. Over decades and decades, infection rates, whether it's a dentist's office, hospitals, has gone dramatically down. A key contributor to that has been the sterilization of medical equipment. And so Bruce Power is the world's largest provider of what we call Cobalt-60 that is used to sterilize that. But what we've been doing is taking that expertise we have in Cobalt-60 and saying, what else can we do? We're currently making a medical grade cobalt, we call it. It's used to treat brain cancer. We're going to be announcing shortly that will be applied to breast cancer. And yesterday in Toronto, we made a very exciting announcement that we are, if you may have read the Toronto Sun this morning, they published an article on this. We are producing a new isotope, we're going to be by 2022, called lutetium-177, which will treat one of the most prevalent forms of cancer, which is prostate cancer. And we're going to start that production in 2022. And so really what we're doing here is we're saying we have an asset that is generating electricity till 2064. What else is a nuclear reactor? Well, a nuclear reactor is really a large neutron source. So as the world is struggling with a supply shortage of medical isotopes, we can provide high volumes of these medical isotopes at a very low, stable, redundant cost. You know, that's where I said that where does 90, you know, you may say, where does the other 1% of your revenue come from? It comes from this. This is not a big money maker for us, but it's really a strategic benefit that Canada can provide, a societal benefit, and obviously it's something our region should be very proud of, that we are, frankly, powering global healthcare on this front. So you're going to see a lot more on that front, and it's incredibly exciting. Some information on there on a few other things. The one thing maybe I will wrap up with, I know I said that was the last item, is I just want to recognize all of you for your contributions and participation in our Regional Economic Development Initiative in Grey, Bruce, and Huron counties. We have over, actually as of today, it's 55 suppliers in the area. We're starting to see suppliers setting up facilities further out of that traditional kind of Saugeen Shores, Kincardine area. And the good news is that even for the suppliers that are concentrated in there, we're seeing a lot of people, you know, move to surrounding towns, have their kids in schools in Grey, Bruce, and Huron. And, you know, what's interesting is when we talk to folks who move up from the city, their first reaction is, oh my gosh, I can't live in Owen Sound or Hanover or Goderich and commute to the Bruce site, because they look at it from the perspective of distance. They say, that's a long distance to go every day. But when you're recruiting somebody from an urban area, you have to change their construct, because they look at distance as a surrogate for time. Whereas in the city, you can go to work in a 10-kilometer distance and you're commuting for 45, 50 minutes. So that has been a bit of a thinking pattern we've needed to change, because if somebody's spending 40 minutes in the city to go 15 kilometers, they don't want to go 50 kilometers in Bruce County thinking it's going to be 2.5 hours. And I know that seems basic to all of us, but that conversation has been really helpful, and it's encouraging people to look at a broader area. And so when we're talking to folks who are coming to the area, we have to remember they're coming from a different mindset. We need to think about that. So, Mr. Warden, thanks very much for having us. I'll take the rest of the slides as read, and I always appreciate the opportunity to come here. I hope this is valuable to you, and I'd be delighted to, David and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, James. I wouldn't mind, actually, and the slides weren't distributed in advance.
Oh, they weren't, eh? Okay.
Apologize for that.
Shame
but
on
I
me
wouldn't
for
mind
that.
if
We'll get
I
them
wouldn't
sent
mind
out.
if you spoke a little bit about the Nuclear Innovation Institute.
Right. So that's a good question. Actually, we just had a dinner in Toronto last night. We're obviously trying to collect contributors to that. Really, if you look at our business, we're going to be in operation for 50 years, 50 plus years. And so what we want to do is, while we have this investment program underway, we want to make sure that we're taking the time to look 5 or 10 years ahead. If you look at, for example, the refurbishment we have coming up, it's a great example. A lot of people think when we have a Boilermaker or a Millwright removing tubes from a reactor, our mental image is that they're out removing tubes. The truth is, the Boilermakers and Millwrights of today, they are in there with advanced robotics, designing the tools, maintaining the tools, and with a robot, safely removing those tools. And so we're an industry that has modernized a very significant way. We need to look at, concepts like artificial intelligence, robotics, advanced analytics, right? These are some of the healthiest assets you will find anywhere. Think about when these were designed in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and look at how far in the future you're going to go. So the Nuclear Innovation Institute is really about, now that we have a critical mass of suppliers here, we want to do all that innovation here in Grey Bruce and Huron counties. We don't need to be doing it overseas. We don't need to be doing it in an urban area. We have the critical mass here. We want people focused on our problems here. And the concept here will be, we had, for example, we call it a hackathon. It wasn't hacking, but that's what they call it, hackathon. And we invited 30 of the brightest university students from across Ontario to a hackathon, broke them up in groups. There was a prize with a, employment grant at the end. It was a really good prize. And we said, here are 3 problems we have. You got 48 hours to go figure it out. And they came up with solutions that were existing technology, and said, you can do this here, and you can save this kind of money. You can, you can make this work safer. You can, and so that's really selling what it's all about, is getting that new thinking into the industry, and recognizing you can't stay still.
For that, Councillor Body has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, James. Right now, there's a lot of pressure on all of us on these words called climate change. They're trying to use the word crisis. United Nations report last year actually doesn't have the word crisis in it anywhere. But anyway, the lower tiers were getting pushed. Sure. I note Canada's responsible for 1.6% of global emissions. Ontario, 0.4%.
Right.
Of the world's. And I understand that's a lot to do with nuclear power generation versus thermal.
Right.
Can you comment on that?
Yeah, for sure. So, so we think climate change is a crisis, but it's a global crisis, right? So maybe the best way I can answer your question is give you an example. So the single biggest climate change initiative we can find anywhere in the world that wasn't a recession, because a recession causes a reduction in emissions too, but that's not a good way to reduce emissions, was the phase out of coal in Ontario. We took 7,500 megawatts of coal offline in Ontario. 70% of that generation was replaced with, as we brought our units back up. So it's the single biggest climate change initiative we can find anywhere. Emissions reduction, clean air, call it whatever you want. China, over a 2-month period, will build 7,500 megawatts of coal. Now, you can look at that, and you can look at it 2 ways. You can say, well, we're good. We don't have to do anything. The problem's over there. So the way I would answer, Ian, your question is really to say, Ontario has shown people around the world how you can reduce emissions using nuclear, how you can use some natural gas to do that, which is lower emitting than coal, how you can mix some renewables in with that. So the economic opportunity for us, it is a global crisis. If China continues to build coal plants at the rate they are, we are in big trouble. And as the Western world, we can't say, don't do that. There's a concept called Kuznets curve, which basically says as societies and jurisdictions become more prosperous, their environmental damage goes up to a point where they reach a level of prosperity where they start to focus on reducing it, like we are, and other Western, we start to reduce it. Remember, we all follow Kuznets curve over the last 40 years. Industrial revolution, we damaged our environment as we were growing our economy. The challenge we all have is we can't ask other countries to not want to prosper. So we need to find a way as a global community to say, how do we let them grow? Because they need to grow, they're going to grow in a way where they don't follow the same path we did. Because we built coal plants, we did all that, now we're on the back end of it. And that's a real opportunity for Ontario, right? The folks that are making components for our nuclear plants, they're exporting to China. they're exporting to India. So we need to look at the climate change solution as an economic opportunity for us. When it comes to Canada, you're right, you know, we're a small portion of it. We believe we need to provide some leadership as Canadians on that, and we have, and we need to continue to do that. But that doesn't mean not growing our economy and doing things. One of our owners is TransCanada Pipelines, right? And they'll tell you a story. It's not their pipeline, but I'm getting into a pipeline debate. I'll get in trouble here. But they'll tell you a story where we can't get a pipeline built from Alberta to the coast of BC. So what happens? We send our oil down to the Gulf of Mexico. It gets picked up. It goes around South America, down and out to China. So do we think that is the world is going to need oil? So what is the most environmentally friendly way? So these are not easy issues, and they're not binary. The problem I have with the debate is people say, well, it's this or this. The truth is it's none of the above. It's a bit of everything. And we have to, as a country, have an adult debate about this and figure out how we're going to do it. And it's not pick lane A or B. It's a bit of everything. Because if there was an easy answer, we wouldn't be debating it. It'd be done. Or if it was, you know, hey, let's do all wind power. I can tell you, if wind power could do it, we wouldn't be splitting atoms down the street. You just put wind turbines up and it was lower cost than us and it worked, you wouldn't split atoms, right? So common sense dictates. So I probably didn't answer your question, but you got me on a bit of a rant, Ian. That's not with my Bruce Power hat on. I'll get in trouble. I'll get in trouble on social media. I always do, but you always get a straight answer.
Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, James and David, for your presence here today. If you ever decide to go into the ministry, you do a tremendous job. Your religion for nuclear power is very evident.
I don't know if I'd pass the conflict of interest guidelines. So,
my question is, what is your cost to produce electricity?
Yep.
And is the capital investment factored into that, and how do those factors work in relation to other forms of
Sure.
energy? I noted your swing at wind power, but
Yep.
that's fine. There's
Yep.
other forms as well, hydro
Yep.
and so on.
Right. So if you look at what people are paid today, so when we produce a megawatt of electricity, it counts for our long-term liabilities, waste, decommissioning, and the capital we've invested to date. And that would be the same with any energy source. So in 2019, our average price paid for our power will be 7.5 cents. That's all in. So that has about $13 billion of investment since 2001 to date that we've invested in that. And so that's where we compare. Hydroelectric is sitting at around 6 cents right now. Obviously, those are really good long-lived assets that don't need a lot of capital, so that helps them there. Gas in Ontario is sitting around 14 cents. With no carbon pricing on it. Wind is sitting at around 17 cents and solar 48. So if you look at it, 85% of the power in Ontario comes from nuclear and hydro, which is an average of 7 cents. And consumers pay, or generators are paid an average of 12 to 13. So you got 85% of your power at 7 to 8 cents, and you got 15% of your power the rest. Obviously, when we invest in the assets, our price of power is adjusted, but it's very competitive over time.
Right.
And by the way, I took a little swipe at wind. We own a wind farm, so it's not that much of a swipe. There's no, we were the first ones, although we didn't get a Green Energy Act subsidy, but all sources of energy have their pros and cons. Like nuclear is not perfect either, right? And when you develop a mix, it's about how do we look at all these characteristics, economic, social, the political acceptance, and how do we build a mix that works? And anybody that tells you I wouldn't tell you it could be 100% nuclear. I don't think that's right either. So, but I do push nuclear as hard as I can. Proud of it.
I would hope so.
Tiffany, did I see your hand?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, James. I wanted to ask you a question, if I may, in relation to workforce. The statistic I'm hearing is that by the time the Bruce has completed your expansion and the subsidiaries and the suppliers and so on that you're bringing into the area, that through all of that, you're going to take roughly half of the available workforce in Grey and Bruce counties. And
Right.
so that is wonderful, but on the other side of that is concerning. And I wonder through your community outreach if there would be any possibility of discussing through marketing perhaps how you might help communities in that way to provide the supports that your staff is going to need in terms, you mentioned healthcare, to help communities to attract the people who will provide the services to the employees that you are now hiring
Right.
within the counties. Could there be any discussion within Bruce to consider that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an excellent point. We try to have a frequent dialogue on that. It's been a topic at the Economic Development Forum, but I think it's a shared problem we all have to work through together, right? I mean, the good news is there's economic growth, but then that tightens the labor pool, right? So, you usually in these kind of discussions have one of two outcomes. You've either got a labor pool that's really tight, or you've got a labor pool that isn't tight, which is bad in another way, right? And so I think our common challenge is we recognize there's a huge, as you articulated, a great economic benefit here. But anytime you have an economic benefit, there is also an adverse side to that. There's affordable housing issues. So there is an impact on those social services. And so we have to work together to minimize those. You gotta remember, it's great we're bringing all these folks in, but they're gonna need, as you say, the kids need to go to school, they need health care, they need to be able to go to and utilize the service sector, right? And so we're committed to doing whatever we can with that. I think what's healthy about what we're doing is, because of the way, and I won't get into it in a lot of detail, because of the way we've staged out our investment, we're trying to avoid big peaks throughout the next 15 years. So we're ramping up, but it's fairly steady. Your peak movement is maybe 300 people at most. So we've really levelized that out, because what we really want to do is we want people coming to the area making permanent decisions. We don't want somebody coming renting a house for 2 years. We want them moving their family up, buying a house, paying taxes, sending their kids to school, so it helps with enrollment and all those kind of things. But the thing we have to work with the provincial government on is, yeah, this is a great economic benefit, but we need to have some of those economic benefits also come back to the area to invest in healthcare and education and things like that too. So we're up for that, and we're not pretending that we're part of this community, and we're not pretending there aren't some adverse impacts that we have to do our best. We're not going to eliminate them, but how do we mitigate them? For example, we're doing an affordable housing project with the with the County of Bruce, supporting them, in a kind way in Kincardine for some affordable housing. We can't build affordable housing fast enough. It's a real problem. Because obviously you see the price of real estate, it's very tough in a lot of cases for working families to afford that.
If I may follow up, Mr. Warden, so are you the best person to communicate with then? Can we as a community reach out to you to perhaps
Definitely.
discuss some of those
Yeah, and
problems?
David's team, and we're always available, absolutely. We're happy to sit down. I think the best forum to do it is where we get at that Bruce Gray Huron forum, because actually a lot of the challenges in your community will be very similar, right? And I think we want to take a regional approach to that, but absolutely. David and I know, and we're happy to talk.
Perfect.
It's an excellent point. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Excellent point.
thank you, Councillor Keaveney. That's a wonderful transition to David, because I can see he's more than just a pretty face back there.
It is, absolutely.
David, is there anything that you want to add with respect to community?
I think that really the approach that we really want to take is bring a form of engagement to a lot of the conversations that we had. James referenced in the presentation today all of the economic benefits, but again, there's going to be adverse effects in terms of other conversations that need to take place. And I think that ideally what we want to do is we want to be able to have those conversations at the ground level as they need to happen, as opposed to coming in at the end.
Kim?
Thanks so much. And James, I just wanted to follow on to the warden's question about the Nuclear Innovation Institute. And yesterday, Saugeen Shores led a press release with regard to the development of a Municipal Innovation Council.
Right.
And I just wanted to say, I think that's a wonderful idea, and really looking forward to an opportunity to
Great.
participate in this. Further to what James said, the Innovation Council is looking to leverage the knowledge and get that transferred out into the community. The Municipal Innovation Council is looking at the challenges that we all face in municipal government with regard to things like construction and things like that, personnel, communications.
I should have said, and I could have done a better job answering your question, because actually one of the things we have at the Nuclear Innovation Institute is a skilled trade secretariat. How do we enhance, not skilled trades just working at Bruce Power, but skilled trades in the area? But I should have said about NII as well, and I know you're probably short on time, is the work you've done, County, and is fantastic. We will ensure work is, is complemented with NII. So, we don't want to create an NII and then it competes with that. We're going to find a way through this dialogue to it all lines up as a lead. So congratulations for the work that you guys have done on innovation, because I think there's some real leadership there. And in fact, I think it was when you guys launched the initiative that it got us thinking, hey, man, from a nuclear perspective, we need to do more on this. So
Very good. Thank you, James.
thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. I'm going to suggest that we take a short stretch break, and we'll come back. Continue on with the agenda. We're on item 5, item 4. I'm looking at the consent agenda. Is there anything that needs to be pulled? If not, LR?
I'd like to pull number 5B, Township of Clearview correspondence.
Okay. Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, moved by Councillor Mackey, seconded by Councillor McQueen. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're on item 6A now, dealing first, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Kim's on deck. I'm looking for a mover to put the item on the floor. Moved by Councillor Milne and seconded by Councillor Robinson. Kim?
Morning, Council. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Council, the report before you asks for your support of a collaborative approach between Grey and Bruce counties to support the development of a community safety and well-being plan to fulfill the obligations under Bill 175, the Safer Ontario Act. I'm also asking for direction on the source of funds for the required project resources. Some of you were able to attend the overview session held by the Grey Bruce Health Unit back in March, where provincial representatives from the Ministry of Solicitor General spoke to the development of the plans. As for those who were able to attend, I will provide a little bit of background. Bill 175, the Safer Ontario Act, received royal assent and was proclaimed in January of 2019. The intent of the legislation was to improve police oversight, transparency and accountability, enhance civilian governance, respond to the needs and realities of Ontario's diverse communities, and a community safety well-being plan that's for you today. Each year, municipalities would have received from the province noting their requirement to have a formally adopted community safety and well-being plan in place by January of 2021. One of the reasons for structuring the proposed project plan as a joint effort with Bruce County, with support from the Health Unit and Victim Services Grey Bruce, is that one of the key objectives of the legislation is to promote collaborative partnerships between municipalities, police, and their service providers. Section 13 of Bill 175 outlines the requirements for preparation and adoption of community safety and well-being plans, and it is quite prescriptive. A plan must identify risk factors in the municipality, prioritize those factors, identify strategies to reduce risks, and set out measurable outcomes to assess the plan's effectiveness. The plan must be monitored, evaluated, reported, and available. A group of municipal councils that are jointly preparing a community safety and well-being plan shall jointly establish and consult with a single advisory committee, and that's what we've proposed here. Ontario Reg 527/18 requires the report, when finished, to be published online within 30 days of adoption. Reports must be provided to the Minister of the Solicitor General. Should a municipality fail to comply with its obligations regarding the plan and its maintenance, the Minister has the power to appoint a community and safety and well-being planner at the municipality's cost. So how will our plan be developed? We're proposing to establish a structure that includes an overall executive steering committee. So this would be a member from Grey's, from the Health Victim Services, and the executive committee support and direction to the project coordinator. The project coordinator will be responsible for supporting the advisory committee. They would plan the meetings, plan community engagement sessions in contact with your municipal liaison, follow up on the advisory committee directions, their documents, etc. This needs to be one of the broad knowledge assistant organizations in our community, and we do have a candidate who has those skills and knowledge. Advisory committee is a critical piece, connecting all the different players. Again, the legislation is prescriptive that you must have a representative from education, from health and mental health, social services, children and youth services, custodial services to children, so children and family services, a police service board, or detachment commander, representative from the police. So with the exception of the police, which there are a number of those, these services that I just mentioned are either provided by organizations with a Gray Bruce mandate or are county-specific organizations. Each of the police services or police service boards in Gray and Bruce will need to participate in the development of the plan. And so there will need to be, as this comes together and with your support, there'll be discussions with the detachment commanders and chiefs. Each municipality will need to have at least one representative at the advisory committee table. And as I said, they'll be the liaison between your respective communities and provide insight and assist to the project coordinate with planning the community engagement sessions. The kickoff for the advisory committee proposed for September this year. Goal is to wrap up the creation plan with sometime January 2021, when you need to have this passed to do any final tweaking within your own communities. What the plan will accomplish, I thought it might be most meaningful to share what a completed plan looks like, so I included the Halton Region Plan for your review and as an example of what this work can offer. I would note that Halton Region is in a little bit different place than us. They have a very mature situation table. So that situation table is one where the leaders with those key responsibilities come together to discuss issues in their community. That's been going on there for a number of years, and it's very well integrated into their governance model. That may be a future state for us, depending on how this work proceeds. Page 6 in the Halton report lists the risks. Here for us, we have a lot of data differences, most recently the Canadian Index of Wellbeing, as well the vital signs about youth reports. The findings from that work will be, I think, appropriate here to establish some of our risk factors. And then page 11 in the Halton report describes the preliminary issues that they chose to give attention and gives you a sense of kind of the scope of things that we might proceed to work on. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions about the process or the idea of having a project coordinator and an advisory committee with executive oversight?
Councillor Rob.
Thank you, Warden, to you, CAO. Very well done on the report, very thorough, and I appreciate it. And I also, rather than a question, just a statement, and that is I appreciate that you've made a distinction between police chiefs at our municipalities versus the OPP detachment. They're very distinct, and the representation is absolutely needed at the chief municipality level. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Councillor Mackey?
Thanks, Gordon. Kim, the Drug and Alcohol Strategy Working Group,
Yes.
that committee is made up of almost all the organizations that you had mentioned. Has there been any thought about just maybe adding on to that committee's mandate instead of, because it's the same people that are meeting, for that leadership table as would need to be representative for this new group. So there might be some synergies there between the two, just to avoid the same people having to meet for additional.
Well, I think that recognition that there's a limited group of folks who are, will be called on consistently throughout this is the reason why we're proposing to have a joint committee. I think because of the requirement here under the legislation to have the committee and to prepare the report, I think it might need to almost go the other way, that the drug and alcohol work might find itself working on this when all is said and done. But those are discussions I think that are most appropriate at the advisory committee table, and we didn't want to get into the details without making sure that there needs to be solid consultation at the advisory committee level, but also in the individual communities.
I certainly appreciate, Mr. Gordon, the work of the county on this. This is the way it should be going. And when this first came to our police services board, it looked like it was going to be a daunting task. But when we saw that there might be the ability to do it collectively, at least at Grey County, Grey Bruce is even better. Because as you mentioned, most of the social services that are out there look after Grey and Bruce. You know, children's age, Grey and Bruce. Children's mental health is Grey and Bruce. Custody services are Grey and Bruce. So, I mean, that makes complete sense, and I certainly would support the county paying for it. Thank you.
And that was a brilliant segue to my, my second part of this resolution, was asking how people wanted to approach the funding model, but perhaps there's another question here.
Entertain a question from Councillor Bartnicki.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and I just want to follow up on what Councillor McKay had said. You referenced Halton, and that was my last project in my working life. We worked with many police forces, 5 different school authorities. It was a huge project. I've also worked with victim services here, and it's Bruce Grey Perth here. And between them, if I'm not mistaken, we have 9 different police services across them. The school boards are another part of this, and they already have had to do these plans. So having those partners at the table might just be not as big a task as you think, because pieces of this work actually already exist for us, and it's a matter of coordinating them and bringing them together.
Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And thanks, Kim. I'm really excited about this plan because I see so much potential here to do good in our communities, and recognizing that our municipalities are so diverse within the county. I'm wondering if there is consideration, or maybe you're already on the track to do this, to have county staff meet with staff from each of the individual municipalities to sort of have an initial discussion about some of those diversities and needs at that level that could be then brought into the discussion at the formal committee level.
I think that will be the role of the project coordinator, to provide that. And I, as I say, that this is just a really significant collaborative effort, because to echo what others have said, right, there's so many people that have some information that will be valuable to bring and weave into this discussion either when we're identifying risks or when we're identifying what those mitigation strategies should look like. There will not be one size that completely fits all. We want to establish the consistency where we can, but then allow for the unique approaches to evolve. So I absolutely agree with you that there needs to be those conversations with each municipality, and we are building that into the work plan.
Councillor Boddy.
Thanks, Kim. As you're contemplating somebody from each of the lower tiers representation, are you thinking elected or more staff?
Well, there's two pieces to this. Certainly, we had contemplated a staff representative, but when I review the legislation, it speaks to municipal officials as well. So it may be that we require both.
It wouldn't necessarily have to be anyone sitting around here. It could be
Oh,
a
no.
counselor from
Absolutely, yes.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Soever.
Yes, and I want to thank Kim for the excellent report. Certainly, I think it's great that we're collaborating on all this, and Councillor Keaveney has already captured a lot of what I was going to say, because we have very unique problems. Most of our community and safety well-being issues come from our 2.5 million visitors to the village area, and certainly that makes it unique. The other issue we have, of course, is that our policing is tied to Collingwood through the Collingwood Town of Blue Mountains Detachment, and so that crosses another county boundary, and so I'm very happy to see that there will be a lot of consultation with individual communities, because there are some things, of course, that we deal with the county, like child services and whatnot, but then there's a lot of stuff where, like, we almost have, the village is almost like a municipality unto itself. So, and it really, when you look at community well-being, I mean, in terms of crime and other issues, drug use, whatever, human trafficking, that kind of thing. It's not the elderly people that have retired in the town of Blue Mountains that those issues relate to. It's, you know, so there is a lot of uniqueness, and on a large area like Grey Bruce, it's great that we're collaborating, but I think we have to realize that there are very unique problems in each part, you know, and sound. The issues are different than they are in the town of Blue Mountains, and so I look forward to working on this.
Very good. Councillor Desai.
Mr. Warden, I agree with a lot of the points that Councillor Soever has raised, in the sense that we are a vastly varying community here in Grey County, and the issues that Hanover faces are completely different, and these are just examples. From Hanover to town of Blue Mountains, there are completely different issues, and in the town of Blue Mountains, as Councillor Soever pointed out, they're crossing county boundaries in some of the services they require. My second question is with regards to the two options that have been provided. One of the options is very straightforward. It's 55,000 county pays. It's done and dusted, or dealt with. The second option is what I have questions with regards to. We can sit here and say that, you know, we'll go back to our lower tiers, but we cannot commit. We don't have none of the lower tiers have quorum here to commit the $5,000. So what happens if we pass that second option, and then 2 weeks from now, a bunch of lower tiers come back and say, oh, we couldn't get it passed? So that is my question, with the feasibility of that second option.
Yeah.
And the third item that I'd also like to raise is, maybe do we want to, and I'm assuming this is the purpose of this, that we're wanting to seek input from lower tiers on whether they want to go with a county plan or not, rather than saying that here's the county plan and you're going with it.
This report was circulated to all of the CAOs. Even prior to that, several of the municipalities had passed resolutions in support of the county moving forward. I think, as I indicate in the report, should an individual municipality decide that they wish to proceed on their own, that's entirely up to them. My only concern is that we do have a project budget, and one particular municipality stepping back probably doesn't make a huge material difference to that project budget bottom line, so it would need to be by the project funding that received from the province. Thinking that the second option, in order to stay aligned with our partners in Bruce County, this is the direction that they've taken, that the county asked each of the municipalities to provide. Again, it's entirely up to them to agree to that or not, as the case may be. We cannot bind them here, you're correct. I would wonder whether or not an individual municipality could actually complete a plan on their own at that level, but maybe you have, you know, a different structure for resources that would enable that.
And if an individual do this own trouble getting service providers out, you know, service providers have full jobs, so we get them out to two committees.
Council Weber.
On that, I think any municipality who didn't contribute the 5,000 would have to do their own plan, and it would cost them considerably more. So I don't know that there's too many politicians that want to spend more of their taxpayers' money. So I don't think there's really a risk there.
Okay, so am I hearing, if I'm listening, that there seems to be a preference that we proceed with the 5,000, the 10,000 and 5,000 contribution? Is that what I'm hearing? No? Or is it that, okay, well, I'm glad I'm checking, because so then it seems that I'm seeing most people nodding around the $55,000 Grey County option. Councillor Mel.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and just for clarification, as mover of the motion, it was my intent for the county to fund the entire project, at least to this point.
Okay, and Councillor Robinson?
Mr. Warden, thank you. And also to echo that statement, it was also my intent as seconder that the county would fund this project.
So thank you for that clarification. So now we know clearly what the motion is on the floor. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. So, Kim, the reserve that we have for this, Is that the,
No,
it's not a reserve?
no, it's not a reserve. I'm thinking of the mitigation funding that we received from.
So the
Province.
mitigation
one-
funding, is
one
that the
time,
cannabis funding that we
No,
received?
the 725.
So could some of that cannabis funding that we received be earmarked for this at all? I just don't know how the county.
That's a very interesting, a very interesting perspective and not one that I'd considered. I don't know. Yeah,
There might be some,
yeah.
might be a way to use some of that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Maybe we could adjust this to be even less specific than it is right now. Right now, it says provided from the county's one-time grant, and perhaps we could just simply say that the 55,000 be provided from
Great
the
County,
county of Gray, and then we can.
and leave it there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? You guys are comfortable with that? Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Are there any opposed?
I'd like to
That's-
record a vote, please.
Okay, then. Madam Clerk?
Counselor Mackey.
Yes.
Counselor Gamble.
Yes.
Counselor Burley.
4.
Counselor Carlton.
Yes.
Counselor McQueen.
Yes.
Counselor Desai.
Aye.
Counselor Patterson. Yes. Warden Hicks.
Yay.
Counselor Clumpus.
Yes.
Counselor Keaveney.
Yes.
Counselor Body.
Yes.
Counselor O'Leary.
In favor?
Counselor Woodbury.
Yes.
Counselor Milne.
Yes.
Counselor Soever.
No.
Counselor Bartnicki.
Yes.
Counselor Robinson.
Yes.
Counselor Hutchinson.
Yes.
The motion was carried 82-7.
Thank you very much. We will move on to item 6B, the school-based capital childcare capital projects update. Barb, that's going to be you. Is Barbara joining you? No?
Barbara's in the room for me if I need some assistance.
Okay, I'm going to look for a mover to put the item on the floor. Moved by Councillor Burley, seconded by Councillor Carlton. You're on.
Mr. Warden. Good morning, County Council. So I'm here to talk to you today about the school-based capital projects that are happening in Grey County. I'm looking for approval of the report, and I'm looking for approval and endorsement of moving forward with the projects that we're going to talk about, and then further that that the Director of Social Services be authorized to execute and sign the joint confirmation forms that need to be submitted to the ministry by the end of August. So most of you know that there have been a number of reports brought forward, and we've talked a lot about changes happening in children's services. And in 2017, there was a capital program that was fairly significant across the province. The Ministry of Education approved proposals here in Grey County to retrofit 99 existing childcare spaces and as well provide 28 new childcare spaces and 1 new early on at various school locations. So I'm here today to talk about a decision on whether the county wishes to execute the joint confirmation with the respective school boards and whether we want to commit to providing operating funds to the new spaces from our current allocation. And this will be significant for us to talk about. So if you have any questions, again, Barb, the manager of children's services in the room. I'm hoping that Tara Cockrell, who had a call with the Ministry of Education this morning, will also be able to join us. But we wanted to ensure that you have a fulsome understanding. So we do provide fee subsidy for eligible families and operating funds for the childcare providers from an envelope of funds provided to us by the province, from the province. So it's a finite amount, and we had been notified that we were going to have significant changes in year. That changed, they were deferred. So we are looking at we don't have a concrete idea of what our future allocation looks like. However, we know what we currently receive. Some of the background is that an investment of $1.6 billion, again, as I referred to, a significant investment for capital funding was provided across the province for standalone childcare builds and retrofits. And those were to create new licensed childcare spaces for kids that are 0 to 4. That does support the vision that the Ministry of Education has, as well as the action plan under the Canada-Ontario Early Learning and Child Care Agreement. So there's a lot of legislation that has led to this direction. Further to the province's request for the capital funding, our staff supported the school boards in reviewing each submission, and they ensured that there was alignment with local and provincial priorities, so we were well aware of what was being asked for. And we were part of the submission. When it was announced back in December of 2017 that 3 of our local school boards were approved for a total of 5 projects, we were very excited about that. And today I'm going to talk to you about the projects that are undertaken by the, I'm not French, I'm going to say the Catholic Providence School, which is our French board, as well as the Blue Water School Board. So you have been provided a chart that talks about the current spaces, the proposed spaces, and the changes based on those school locations. You'll see that the location at Le Jardin Saint-Dominique is space neutral. That's important. That just means that the current space that is provided for the childcare those spaces will be the same in the new build. So there is no shift. You'll see the change as 0. There are 2 different sites with the Blue Water Board, and those are Kids and Us locations, one in Durham and one in Holstein. The one in Durham will see a slight increase, more than slight, it's moderate, 19 space increase, and they will be in a new site that is different. We're currently located in Rockwood Terrace, and this will solve a couple of questions that the operator has. And I guess at this point they are a month-by-month lease, and it will continue that way until we are in a new space. The Holstein location is only very slight increase, but will have a significant improvement over where they provide care right now. We're currently in portables. Their lifespan is well past. If you've ever been, you'll know that they are in desperate need and are looking very forward to a standalone brick building that will augment what they can offer to the families. So one thing that you need to know is that in June, the Ministry of Education did tell us that any capital projects that are selected to not proceed will not receive any of those capital funds. So that's important, because if we choose not to proceed, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, they will be there's no opportunity to go back to them afterwards. And there are lots of our neighbors in municipal delivery across the province that have said no thank you, because they can't commit to that future funding piece. So I'm going to talk about that right now. So in April, we were asked to confirm by MedU, our Ministry of Education, that we would support ongoing operating funding for the existing within our existing childcare allocation, and that the additional licensed spaces will be created as part of the capital build. So we're going to have more spaces within our current allocation. That will have an impact to how we fund the other childcare centers, the existing funding model. So each CMSM, so that's us as the service manager, we determine how to distribute our fixed allocation, which is made up between our general operating grant and our childcare fee subsidy. So families receive the fee subsidy based on a sliding scale. If I'm eligible for it, I'll receive a fee subsidy based on what my income is. But the general operating grant is a calculation for operators to help keep the costs down for families. So there's 2 pots, but it's one pot. And so if we assist these childcare centers with the additional spaces with more of that general operating grant, there could be less subsidy to provide to families. So it's a bit of a conundrum we're in. So it's a balancing act. And so we do know that we need those new childcare spaces. These 28 spaces are important, and we know that we have growth in these communities. And so we're looking to work on an ongoing basis with our operators, hoping for further funding, but being realistic in what the messaging has been from the province, that we will need to look at this as a system shift. And going forward, it's up to us as the service system manager to provide that leadership to our childcare community. So today we have an opportunity to have one of 3 options. First is to defer. So on that joint confirmation form I spoke to earlier, we can defer this and say we don't want to do it right now until we know more information. I'm not sure that's an opportunity for us because I don't think there's any more funding. And I've already spoken to the fact that we've been told, if you say no, these aren't coming back. We can proceed and that the Grey County Council approve and that the school board confirms that the project will proceed, and any required operating funding for the new childcare spaces will be managed from our current portfolio, from our existing operating budget. And the third one we can do is not proceed, and we would say no thanks, and then we would just, the required operating funding would be the same, and so I'm not sure whether that's an option or not for us. So just going back a little bit, we do believe that we have that obligation to provide that leadership and engage with our community and have this discussion. We also know that our staff will has had some preliminary dialogue with our folks. The potential impact is not in 2019. It could be in 2020, but it's going to go through to 2022 when these spaces open. And so it is understood that the general operating grant funding may be reduced to all operators. So again, we don't have, we aren't at a point where we have a subsidy freeze, but if we increase one of those funding levels, it could impact the other, which then could lead to having to balance again what funds are available to support the families in need. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Councillor Mill?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Barb, for the report. The one at Holstein particularly, I'm aware of. My kids attended that location, and my oldest is 31 now.
Yes.
So that location was a little bit tough when my kids were going there, and they weren't any easier on it. So I wholeheartedly support moving ahead with this project. The community needs it. They expect it. I applaud Barb and her staff for the work that they've done to bring this project to the point it's come to now, and acknowledge that it is a balancing act, but the community does need this project to go ahead, so I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Burley?
Thank you. Barbara, I need you to educate me. We were very fortunate to attend downtown Dundalk. Beautiful place, an arena, and they're doing some major renovation to it. Is that part of this program?
That's an early on center, and that was under another capital build. But it's very similar within that context of our staff working with the respective municipalities and the boards of education to say, what can we do? How do we best meet the needs? So that was submitted under another grant application. We were fortunate to receive those dollars. This is the child care center piece. That is the early on center piece, the family piece. Okay.
So, on the motion to receive the report and to endorse the staff recommendations, I call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Barb. Item 6C, that's the window replacement at 305 14th Street West in Owen Sound. I'm looking for, maybe Owen Sound would like to move. Moved by Councillor Body, seconded by Councillor O'Leary. And Anne Marie, you have the
Thank you.
floor.
Thank you. These funds are the Social Housing Apartment Improvement Program. They were under the former Provincial Climate Change Action Plan, and they were from cap and trade funds. So this program actually has been canceled, as you're well aware. And due to that, year 2 and 3 of funding for this program were also canceled. This is our year 1 funding, 2018-19. Projects are all due to be completed now by March of 2020. So it has significantly moved up our deadlines due to the cancellation of the program. With this program, we have put on a new roof and new insulation at the high rise. This program is specifically for high rises only, and we only have one in Grey County. So that is pretty easy for us as to what building we were going to choose to do some renovations on. The idea is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but at the same time to protect our building envelope and also to increase our sustainability of social housing. We chose to replace windows at the high-rise, 428 of the windows. They were last done in 2013. Unfortunately, the windows that were chosen, 2003 is the last time that they were done, and the windows that were chosen have not lasted to the lifespan that we thought that they would or hoped that they would. We have a number of them which are in need of repair or replacement. So it was a pretty easy choice for us as to what we wanted to spend our money on. It did come in over budget. When we did look into prices last year, the prices, number one, have gone up, and number two, we did look at doing tempered glass. So tempered glass would be a luxury, not something that we needed, but we thought that it might be a nice have. So it did come in over budget. We are able to provide $654,000 through the SHAPE program, and we have a deficit of $57,951 to come out of any surplus that we have within our own 2019. Right now, we do have that surplus available, although we do have a number of projects still that need to be put out, but we do have surplus in our capital budget for that right now.
Councillor Milne?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Anne Marie, for the good report. In terms of the new windows providing better energy efficiency or retaining of energy inside the building, do you have any idea what the payback will be, or how much of a savings we might anticipate?
Certainly. So we did do an energy audit on the building. We do one before and one afterwards. And we had a good idea through our last building condition assessments. We also did energy audits back in 2014. We, of course, had no idea that this money was coming out when social housing was devolved to us in 2001. We haven't seen much money come forward for capital, very little, in fact. I think this is maybe the third program in 20 years, almost 20 years. So we had already done LED lighting inside our building through a hydro program. We replaced our siding because of some brick pointing issues we had to do, so we also increased the insulation on that. So when we looked at it, there were some minor things that we still can do. So they might have been low cost, such as aerators maybe on some of our taps, and looking at possibly some lighting controls, things like that we can do. But with the large amount of money that we had, we chose one that probably is not as financially attractive. So the rebate will probably never pay for our windows over the length or life of the windows. But we will be saving about $10,000 a year, supposedly, in natural gas and electricity costs for these windows. But at the same time, we knew in the next 5 years we would have to replace them anyways. So I think it's sort of a double whammy for us. The other nice part about it is that the building code has changed since then. All of our high-rise, so any building that is over 3 feet, if you're putting in a window now, you can no longer put the sliders in, which makes sense, but that wasn't, of course, part of the building code before. So we'll be up to building code specifications, which is nice. We do have a number of tenants that are not as thrilled with the new changes due to air conditioners and whatnot, just in case you might hear from that.
Right.
But it really is for their safety.
Councillor Mackey?
Anne Marie, how long would you expect these new windows to last?
Well,
That would be the hope.
yes. Well, we are putting in a better quality window and a triple pane window too. So I think that for what we're hoping, we're going to get more than the 15 years that we've got out of these. The lifetime warranty on them is a 30-year window that we're putting in, so fingers crossed.
Councillor Burley, this is not one we can blame on you or your...
No, it's not.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So we'll move on to item 5B that was pulled from the consent agenda. Councillor Soever, do you?
Yes. I read with interest this letter from Mayor Measures. And he says, in the second paragraph, he says, at a minimum, I would have expected an opportunity to discuss and address any concerns. But I don't know what the county did, but I tried to reach out to him initially, and we didn't hear back. I approached him at an event, and there was no interest in meeting, so I think it's a little disingenuous in the letter to say that we're not meeting with him. But I also note that he says in here that the $4 million estimate, which was talked about at a public meeting, it says, with the surprise introduction of new regulation requiring that the work requires a development permit, that budget would be increased substantially, but nowhere near the 4 million. I find that hard to believe, having driven the road and having built roads myself. And when there's water running out of a road, it certainly requires a pretty good base and drainage, and I don't know what they're planning. So I would suggest that we take him up on his last sentence where he says, I would be happy to make our staff and consultants available to you and your staff to further clarify the need for these improvements and the process, because right now we don't understand really how that new road, the way it's proposed to be built, I was told that we just push it through and let the traffic pound the gravel in, and that's probably the $500,000 budget amount. But I don't know how a road like that is actually gonna handle the traffic. So I would suggest that I would like to move that we instruct staff to meet with their staff and consultants and find out exactly what is being proposed in the form of that road and how it's gonna handle the current amount of traffic as a alternate route to highway to County Road 91, and so we can better understand how our traffic patterns won't be impacted by the closure of 91 and the reconstruction of 26, 27 into some form. So I would just like to move that we have our staff meet and find out what the road's going to look like and how it's going to deal with the traffic patterns that exist today, not 10 years ago.
Randy, anything to, oh, sorry, what I should say before we move on, would you be the mover? It's not actually on the floor as yet, so you move, and seconded by Councillor McQueen. Okay. Randy, anything to add?
Nothing further to add at this point. Obviously, if council directs staff to meet with them, we're more than happy to meet with them. We've reached out to NEC staff to clarify some of the comments and questions raised in the letter. I know Pat has had already some initial discussions with Clearview's engineering consultant as well. So I don't know if Pat has anything further, but at this stage, but we're at the end of the day, you know, Niagara Escarpment Commission is going to have to make a decision on the Niagara Escarpment Plan amendment. Obviously, we've submitted our comments and the motion that was passed by council previously. We've got now the response from Clearview Township. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else can be done at this stage. But again, if council directs staff to meet with Clearview Township staff, we're more than happy to do that.
Okay. Councillor McQueen?
Thank you, Mr. Ward and County Council. I find this letter quite interesting in the point. I'm going to refer to the last paragraph, and it says about working together. This all came together just more recently. We found on line that there was a study in 2007, a traffic study that was commissioned by the Walker Aggregate Company to look at traffic. And from that, it does show that there is a lot of traffic that does come and go from Simcoe County to Grey County. In 2003, in that room over wherever we are, County Council, along with working with Simcoe County, approved an agreement with the realignment of Grey Road 31 and Simcoe County Road 91, because at that time, I don't know if anybody else was around the table at that time, it stopped at Rob Roy and the county road went down through the Pretty River Valley. At that time, I think maybe Mr. Miller was probably the warden at the time, was that they realigned that Simcoe, or Grey Road 31 to go to County Road 91 into St. Hampton. This county made a major investment on resurfacing that road, constructing that road to be resurfaced. And it was the last gravel road left in the county system. So there was a major investment from County of Grey, but also there was an agreement that's still on the books that was passed in 2003. It talks about working together. In 2009, when this was all brought together, Simcoe Grey, and Simcoe and Clearview, along with the agreement that was signed at the county council in early 2010, they talk about working together. Well, there was no public consultation during that process. Also, we know that regionally, and we've heard that discussion, and I'm not going to rehash that, is we know that corridor moves a lot of people. And then to suggest that now we're in 2019, 2009 was when this was all crafted. We're 10 years later. Can you tell me that our traffic has gone down? I would say not. We promote tourism, we promote economic development. Tourism is a big thing for Grey County, along with Simcoe County. Our region, Blue Mountain, look at the growth that Blue Mountain has had. The movement of traffic has drastically has increased. So you talk about working together. I'm a little bit perplexed to think that, and I think part of and they sort of feel that the Class C bump up is to cost more money, but as we all are aware that Class C process looks at the regional, looks at traffic patterns, traffic that's happening in part of that development. You know, certainly there's a letter that we dealt with the last county council that talked about process and the development permit. And we also talked back when we supported this changes to this direction, which we're getting response to from this county council with regards to the bump up to a C. We do know that, and this county council supported it, that certainly the reconstruction of 2627, I think we all would agree, if it was brought up to a similar, and this was the position of Grey Highlands at the time, if that road was brought up to equivalency of what they're replacing, I think we'd all go say, that's good, do what you want. But to think that we as a county, no different than a municipality, is to think that you're cutting off a border, and that border is no different than any other parts of Grey County, whether it's Hanover into Walkerton, or whether it's Newstack going somewhere else, or any other areas that we move traffic. We're just not a closed community like they're suggesting they are, like sort of like back off, let us do our own thing. But traffic moves throughout, and this is where it becomes a provincial interest, and I think that's what we're trying to say here is, you know, even from that report that I was just looking at that was commissioned in 2007 by Walker Industry, they had a traffic count at that time of 950 cars per day, and they were projecting in 2016, you know, their 10 years forward thinking was going to be up around 1,300 cars per day. Well, again, it just shows how traffic has increased. So I certainly support the idea of having those conversations with them, but I think that in the bigger picture, and I know we're having that conversation with maybe at AMO or sending letters of support with regards to that, but I think that this is a bigger picture in the sense of not their small construction. And you know what? 26, 27, if it was their own project on their own, but we know that's not the real deal. The real deal is they're closing 91 and making 26, 27, and still not suggesting it's going to even be surface. So until it meets those 400 cars per day, and we know that with the vertically, those that have driven that road, it is vertically challenged. And you know, it's always been our position as Grey Highlands and others that you have a vertically challenged hill at 14% or whatever that percent of grade is, a gravel road, it becomes, after a rain, a much less traveled road, and you'll never meet those traffic volumes of 400. So one could argue it's doomed to fail. So again, Mr. Warden, I think then in a sense that some of the points, and I can see it's self-serving, that's in my opinion, not the County of Grey's, what they want to do, but we know that this is a bigger issue, and certainly, maybe there needs to be some clarity. I certainly would support if there's further discussion. And I don't know, I think we brought this up before from Patrick, is how much inter-county discussions, I know we do have a lot of discussions with Bruce County, but I don't know, do we have those discussions? And maybe we need to look at a bigger picture of the big picture of traffic moving through, we call it RTO 7. And there's another part of that. RTO 7 is about promoting not only Grey County, Bruce, and Simcoe, because it's that corridor of moving people from the GTA in a tourism park. So you would think that would be a no-brainer. But anyway, I'll leave it at that, Mr. Warden. There could be others to have discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and notwithstanding the issues that Councillor McQueen and Councillor Schweber raised, I think until the NEC makes their decision on what's to be done there, there's little to be gained by having more discussions. Our staff have plenty to do with our own roads here in Grey County. They've already had some discussions, both planning and roads, about this issue, asking them to have more meetings on an issue that the NEC needs to rule on, basically. I don't see any need to do that, and I don't see any gain for the county to do that other than choose up more time that we need to spend on our own roads. So I am disinclined to support this motion.
So the motion, as I understood it, was not around the staff piece. The motion was to receive, as you see in the agenda, to receive the letter for information. If there is something else being added, I'm not aware of that. I heard that as a suggestion that staff reach out. Oh, my apologies, I didn't. I'm sorry? Oh, it was not moved or seconded, so that's what I'm hearing. So the only motion that's on the floor right now is to receive for information. If that motion is going to come forward, we'll need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Mackey?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. And through you to Pat, I was just wondering if Pat could, give County Council a little update on discussions that take place with neighboring municipalities, boundary agreements, interconnectivity, because, as Councillor McQueen mentioned, there are a lot of our roads that we spend a lot of money on, and if all of a sudden our neighboring municipality decided that they were going to turn it back to gravel, there's implications for us. So on a larger picture, how are the discussions being considered?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Warden, yeah, we do meet yearly with Simcoe, Dufferin, Bruce, and Huron. But of course, this agreement was all before we kind of did the tri-county meeting thing with Simcoe and Dufferin. So we hadn't really talked, we didn't talk specifically a lot about this because it was kind of, we had an agreement, and it was kind of something that wasn't really still in the works, although it kind of is now. But we do meet with them now, and we talk about what our programs are. We have access to their 10-year, and they have access to ours. And this is very unusual that a road's getting closed. I don't know if I've ever seen it that I can think of, other than, a smaller township road or something. But as far as a county road being transferred to a lower tier, I've never seen that happen. But we do talk to them now. I would think if this was, this process would be a little more transparent next time, I would hope.
So I can, Councillor Bartnicki?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. If you would just allow a brief comment. Sometimes I think that the struggles between smaller neighbors, you lose sight of the big picture. And I'm wondering, Pat, if anybody has talked about the benefits to the ministry's overall transportation plan. This looks like a really good east-west artery, and it would likely cost tens of millions of dollars to find an alternative if that were to be the case down the road. I'm just wondering if the ministry has been involved at all.
Through you, Mr. Warden, not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Councillor McQueen?
To iterate, I look at the third last paragraph in the letter, and it says, we ask that the county agree, respect Clearview's jurisdiction. It is a dangerous precedent to set when a neighboring municipality intervenes to stop another municipality from improving a road within its existing road allowance. Municipalities routinely improve roads within their own jurisdiction without a Class C environmental assessment. For instance, the Grey County recently improved County Road 31, and it carries on. I guess what I think it's the bigger picture here is we worked, I think, prior to 2010, very closely with Bruce County when we did the town line agreement. We spent a lot of money there. You look at Scone. Well, geez, if that was all of a sudden going to be turned into a gravel road, I think Bruce County would be a little bit going, hey, what's going on, boys, girls? So that's the one part. The part about the Class C is to look at that bigger picture as far as transportation. And in 2003, we do have an agreement with Simcoe County that was a realignment of the east-west corridor. So to completely throw that out the friggin' window, I think and 10 years later, we know that even from a report in 2007 by Walkers and other reports say that the traffic is being increased. It continues to increase. Why would we do that investment of 31 to go to a gravel road? It doesn't make sense. So that's the point that I think that needs to be driven home. And it's the bigger picture. It's not, stand alone on that road, fill your boots. I think that's a one. Fill your boots, right? But the thing is it's the bigger picture. And that's the part that seems to be lost in the letter. We're not trying to tell them what they can do and what they can't do. It's the bigger picture.
Okay, we've had good discussion. I can tell you that I have a very good relationship with the warden for Simcoe County. He and I have talked a little bit about this, and the plan is that we are going to have a better discussion once he has some discussions on his end. We're hoping to bring the temperature down a bit once those discussions happen. So know that will play itself out. But right now we have a motion that we need to vote on, which is to receive the letter for information. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay. So is there any other business? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Burley and Councillor Hutchinson. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much.